As we know, the midwives, Shifra and Puah, Yocheved and Miriam, and Pharaoh's daughter. So we're not talking about that today because we've gone through them in detail. Also, before we moved out of the Torah, there were another group of women, but I decided not to teach them because I've taught them to a lot of people in our class before. And I actually wrote a Shabbat message about them, which I could send anyone who wants, which are the 5 daughters of Tzalofachad. And just to say in like 3 sentences, it's at the very end of the book of Numbers, which is really when the Israelites are on the border and about to enter into the promised land. And Moses and all of the high officials are parceling out everybody's portion, where your tribe will be, what piece of land you will have when you enter. But it goes by the fathers and the sons. And these 5 sisters approach Moses, and this is in the text, and they say, our father is dead, we have no brothers, we believe we deserve land as well in our own right. And Moses doesn't know what to say. This has never happened. And you have to imagine that these 5 sisters came to like the tent of meeting to interrupt this big process, which would be like 5 nobody women walking into the cabinet meeting at the White House or into the Capitol building during a session of Congress and asking to be heard. And they are heard. And Moses in the text asks God what to do. And God says, they are right. They deserve a portion. And so this is the first time, it's very early, 3,000 years ago, that women are accorded owning land, property on their own right. If there's no father and there's no brother. Mm-hmm. But Jews were actually the first to give women property rights and daughters before most other societies later on. But this was already a benchmark that women could own. Then there's a little caveat a few chapters later where the men come to Moses and say, well, if these sisters marry somebody from another tribe, their land will then belong to the husband and be belonging to the other tribe. And that's not fair because it'll take from our tribe. You have to think of the tribes of like the 13 colonies. You know, it's like each tribe had a state, so to speak, their own land. So they're saying that, so they amended the law. This was not from God, but they amended the law that the women had to marry men within their tribe so that the land that they brought to the husband would remain within the boundaries and of the tribe. But nonetheless, so that's a story in the Torah and a parsha, but I didn't want to do that because I've taught it a lot. And if anybody wants the commentary I wrote on it, let me know and I will send it to you. What I want to talk about today is we're finally out of the Torah. We're going into the book of Joshua. And we're going to talk about Rachav, or in English, she's called Rahab. And she's another, I want to ask you about this, but we'll read up the text first. She's yet another prostitute. It seems like prostitutes, or being a prostitute, had a lot of power or influence in the Torah or in the Bible. And this is a woman who's considered a heroine, and she was a prostitute in the city of Jericho. That was the first city, you know the song Joshua fought the battle of Jericho. That was the first city this is now in the book of Joshua. The Torah is finished. Moses has died, and Joshua has inherited his mantle as the leader. So now, and he's the warrior, and he is the one that's going to lead them into battle, into the land. So first thing I want to do is look at the actual text of what it says in the book of Joshua. We can read the text, and then we'll look at the commentary and the midrash about it. So let me just share I sent it to you. I don't know if you have it, but I'm going to put it up as well. Okay, share. I put it in really big print. So, okay, so this is it's Joshua, the book of Joshua. If you have a Bible, a Tanakh, it would be coming right after the end of the Torah, after the book of Deuteronomy. This is what's next. And it's chapter 2. First chapter is sort of about sort of their settling and planning and whatever. Okay, so Stacy, why don't you read some of it?
Okay. Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. Go, look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there.
Okay, let's just start with this.
Oh my God.
Why did they go to a prostitute?
Right.
I mean, and what is the status, do you think, of prostitutes compared to other, we have like other, well, the first spies that were sent went nowhere, but we know like the 2 angels came to Sodom and Gomorrah. They came to Sodom and Lot put him in his house, but then he offered his daughters as prostitutes, to save their lives. And then we know Tamar, if you remember, pretended to be a prostitute in order to get justice from Judah. So, but it doesn't explain why they went to a prostitute. So what's your thinking of why these spies would go to the house of a prostitute?
May I answer that?
Yes, go ahead.
I think it's because they were facing battle and they were afraid and lonely and they needed a little bit of relief.
Okay, so you think they went for the sex, is what you're saying?
I think they went for the status and also because they're men and that was the thing of the day. And also,
but that's not their job. Their job is to go spy the land. So we're not saying
they wanted information.
Okay, all right. There's a thought. Okay,
they wouldn't be very conspicuous if they went to a prostitute.
What did you say, Claudia?
That they're spies, so they wouldn't look very conspicuous if they went to a prostitute. They wouldn't be that noticed.
Well, I think also all of the men probably went through there, and so the prostitutes are going to be able to extract a lot of information, and they could get it. And then they had the frosting on the cake. I'm sure they indulged, but that's where they would find all the information of everything they needed.
Okay, now it wasn't a house of prostitution. She was her own prostitute. She lived there, and this was her house. But I think, okay, Jeff, you had a comment? You're muted. You're muted.
I think it's been hinted at that the level of communication between the prostitute and the client can be very open because of the thought on the part of the client that it represents a form of communication which isn't public.
Okay, so then we're assuming that the prostitute is going to tell them what she's heard, but there might be another way to gain information there. Penina?
Okay, when I was growing up and they were talking about the word zonah, they also gave the possibility that it comes from the word mazon, which means food, that she was also like an innkeeper, that you can go and eat there and refresh, like drink and eat. And if it's an innkeeper, you could also get a place and it wouldn't be a suspicion, because if it's a hotel, then you expect to have people there and nobody would go there to actually look for it.
The word zona does come from mazon. It could
right.
be. But
so they think that she had she was like an innkeeper and they would go for food.
And a prostitute.
Yeah.
But also a prostitute.
Yeah.
Now, another idea, any other ideas of why they would go there? Well, there would be a lot of other men there hanging around, waiting their turn or associate, so then you could blend in and say, oh, what do you do? What's it like here? I'm looking for a place to live. What is the army? You could start conversations with men who are also there to be patrons, or if they're guests of the inn, if she had an inn as well, or she put people up. So it was a way to blend in.
And also she hid them. She told them to go hide when people would say,
Not yet.
Okay.
Also, it's likely, this just comes to me, that men from other countries would go to a prostitute. So even though they didn't look like Jericho, people from Jericho or Canaanites, perhaps, we don't know, that it wouldn't be unusual to see different nationalities at at a house of prostitution or at a prostitute's house, where at other places you might stand out, probably like all the merchants, as Donna said, they came there, sea people, it wasn't your sea, so it wouldn't be sailors, but merchants would go there. So, okay, so that's why we can surmise that they might have gone there, because the Torah doesn't really, the text doesn't, oh wait, how do I do share? Where's Rahav? Okay. Share. All right. So, okay. Continue. Who was reading? Stacy. Okay.
The king of Jericho was told, "Look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land." So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab: "Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land."
Okay, well, so much for disguise. How did the king know? How did the king know? Doesn't explain that. So what do you think? And not only did he know they were Israelites, but they knew they were spies. How did he know? How would he know? Do you have any idea?
May I answer that?
Yes.
Because I live in the hood, and everything that happens over here seems to get all the way to Beverly Hills and everywhere at the temple. And it's like to put boots on the ground. Everybody, the word is out. There are people on the street, tell everybody everything. So it's not hard for the king to find out. He has spies out there listening. So that would be my answer.
That's probably good that he had spies also. But it's interesting that the king knows, and he tells Rahab, okay, turn them over, which also, it's curious, and I don't have an answer for this. It's not like they just go there and arrest them. They don't send the army. They don't send people. They say, Rahab's, couldn't they enter her house? But they say, send them out. We hear, maybe it was a rumor because he heard about it, but she denies it. So perhaps it was a rumor, but in any case, the king knows Rahab, which makes us wonder, and says, give us these guys. Okay, so
So Rabbi,
yes.
is that an act of civil disobedience? She could have gotten arrested, right? She defied the king.
Yes, but why? Was she doing a good deed, or did she have a personal motivation? So why don't you read?
Me?
Okay. Yeah, Laura. The woman said.
But the woman had taken the two men and hidden them. She said, yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, they left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly, you may catch up with them. But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut.
Okay, so we have a sense of the culture of these ancient cities. There were gates, there was a wall, and at night they locked the gates and no one could come in and no one could leave. And she lied and she said, they left before dusk and, we should follow them. And then the gates were shut, so the pursuers couldn't get back in until morning. So she sort of saved the spies. I don't know if you were aware of this, but King David, who was married to one of King Saul's daughters, Michal, did the same. King Saul wanted to kill King David, and Michal warned him, jumped out the window. He wasn't a king then; he was just a young man. And she saved him and lied and says, he wasn't here. Or I don't know where he went. So there's this idea of women hiding or saving men. If you look at biblical women, they're pretty powerful. We look at sort of the role of women today, or the role of women even in Europe or medieval times or whatever. But if we look at biblical women. They had a lot of power and a lot of agency, and not just noble women. Here's a prostitute, you know, and we remember Tamar, and even Hagar had some agency. She was a slave, and God spoke to her and blessed her. So there's a view of women as equal or powerful or different in their power, but certainly somebody to contend with, and not just, you know, in the rib or the, you know, that idea of the subordinate that came up later. Maybe I kind of feel once Christianity sort of took over of the world, it changed, because even in Roman times, there were powerful Roman matrons and whatever. And it was really after the Roman Empire fell and Christianity sort of swept through Europe that women were subordinated and made inferior. So it's very interesting that our history is to be powerful and strong. Okay, any comments? Yes.
May I say, Devorah, which is my Hebrew name, I just not about me, but it's about Devorah. I think if I'm right, did she not lead all the men into battle?
Yeah, that's our next person that we're gonna talk.
Oh, wow.
Deborah, yes, Devorah, yes, she's next. Okay, so anybody have any comments or thoughts about what I've said? Okay, let's continue. All right, so now Rachav. Here, we're going to, okay, so Claudia, do you want to read Before the Spies?
Sure. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up on the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We had heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below.
Okay, so let's stop for a minute.
Wow.
So it wasn't just altruism that she was saving them. Why was she saving them?
She was scared.
Scared. She was scared, and they were powerful. Now, let's compare this to what the spies said 40 years before. Do you remember what they said? Susan Ehrlich, what did they say?
Yes, they said they were giants. We were like grasshoppers before their eyes, and they were powerful, obviously, from that, and we don't have a chance. So this is just the opposite. This is quite in awe and in praise of the Israelites.
Yeah, so exactly. The spies who came to look at the land 40 years ago said, oh my God, we'll never be able to conquer them. And that is the reason, if you recall, that God said, all right, this generation, forget it. We have to let them die out. They're staying here 40 years and the next generation will go in. And now in Jericho, they've all heard of all of the successes, the glory, the power of God, of their battles or whatever. And so she's saying, okay, I know who you are. I'm not going to mess with you. It's interesting. And so I'm saving you. But Rachav, being a very smart woman, what do you think she's going to ask for in return?
She wanted protection.
Protection. She's going to say, okay, so when you come in, I want you to save me, because so she was a very smart woman. Okay, so that's exactly what she says. Let Susan Ehrlich, why don't you read it? Okay, hold on. Okay, here it is, 12. Now then, please.
Gavin, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death.
I just love her because she's not about herself. She's about her entire extended family. You know, I want you to save everybody in my family.
Bravo, bravo.
It was great. But the cartoon version has her having a little boy.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Go ahead.
Our lives for you, for your lives, and answered her. If you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land.
Keep going.
So she let them down by a rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. She said to them, "Go to the hills so the pursuers will not find you. Hide yourself there 3 days until they return, and then go on your way." Now the men had said to her, "This oath you made us swear will not be binding on us unless when we enter the land you have tied this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down. And unless you have brought your father and mother, your brothers and all your family into your house. If any of them go outside your house into the street, their blood will be on their own heads. We will not be responsible. As for those who are in the house with you, their blood will be on our head if a hand is laid on them. But if you tell what we are doing, we will be released from the oath you made us swear." "Agreed," she replied. "Let it be as you say."
Okay, might as well finish.
The red string occurs in a lot of places. Wasn't there when Jacob and Esau were born? And then, of course, in later superstitions.
Yes, we'll talk about that in a minute. Just finish up the story.
So she sent them away, and they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. When they left, they went into the hills and stayed there 3 days, until the pursuers had searched all along the road and returned without finding them. Then the 2 men started back. They went down out of the hills, forded the river, and came to Joshua, son of Nun, and told him everything that had happened to them. They said to Joshua, "The Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us." Wow, a different story from the spy, right?
Yes, totally different from the spies. So I just want to ask you, what do you notice about the style of this story compared to the Torah?
It's narrative. It's interesting. It could be a movie, whereas much of the Torah, other than Genesis, could not be a good selling movie.
Yes. Okay. So there's this theory that the book of Deuteronomy, which is different than the rest also, and all of this, Joshua, Judges, Samuel 1, 2, Kings 1 and 2, were written by what they call the Deuteronomists, or the Deuteronomy school of writers. And they wrote with such detail and humanity that we actually feel the characters, and they give dialogue and they give descriptions and colors. And you'll see as it continues, they give emotions. They're feeling this, they're feeling jealous, they're feeling sad, they're feeling whatever. It was a whole different school of writers, and they're really enjoyable to read and study because they evoke very, very evocative. So in this story, what do we think about the spies, and what do we think about Rachav? I mean, they mentioned she's a prostitute, but what else what can we say about her character, would you say? I'd love
Can I say?
Yeah, but I'd like to hear someone else.
Of course.
Come on. Cindy, you're a smart woman. You study Melton.
Well, that she's honest, she's caring, she protects her family, and she risked her life because if she was caught, she could have been killed.
Right. Okay, good. What else? What else would we say about her? Risa.
Well, eventually we know that she believes what she's saying about not just her fear, but her awe and respect for the God of Israel.
Right.
So we know that already. And she's clever and careful, and is taking good advantage of the fact that her home is in a very strategic place.
Yes, she's very clever. She's smart. She's a smart woman, and she negotiates. She bargains. She, says, "Okay, I did this," and I love that she used the word kindness. It's like, it's not you owe me, or here's a deal. I was kind to you, so you be kind to me.
To
It's a
me.
very female word. I don't see a man negotiating with other men and saying, well, I was kind to you, so you be kind to me, right? You wouldn't hear that, but you hear it from her. Yes, Miriam.
She is a woman to be admired for this reason alone, aside from the other qualities that my friends have mentioned. She starts by thinking these thoughts, and we all do. But then she becomes the woman of action. She's the one who speaks out. She's the one who's unafraid, which so many women would like to be, but are unable to do. She has this tremendous inner motivation that absolutely propels her to become what she asks for. People of action.
I think you're right.
She's admired for that reason.
You know, also, it strikes me that she's used to talking to men. She's a prostitute. She knows men and she knows the right words and she knows what to say, and she's not intimidated because she's a prostitute, so she deals with men all the time. And again, she uses these feminine words to not be a threat, to say kindness and save my family. And they say to her, you know, okay, but what do we think of the spies? What do we think of these spies compared to the other spies? Any thoughts about the spies? No thoughts about the spies? Come on.
They're smart, and they also want the sign so that they can, otherwise, you know, the Israelites will come in and won't know where where is Rahab just by a description. So they suggest this sign, so that you can prove it. And it also doesn't go back to the blood on the Passover, because the red string could be like a string of blood without having to do blood, and those were saved. So maybe it has some biblical resonance as well.
That's interesting.
Very smart.
And Joshua was there. You know, he was one of the ones from the Exodus. So yeah, or maybe these spies were too. But I mean, I never thought of that. But I like that idea that the red is sort of the symbol of being passed over.
If I trust them though.
What?
I don't know if I trust them. Like, what if they're not the ones that come back? What if they don't give out the word about the red string in one window, one house? I don't know if I'm buying this.
Yes, but like, what other choice do you have?
Right. You're stuck.
Right.
You know what I mean?
What choice do you
You're
have?
coming to conquer, and you're making a deal with the enemy from the view of the Jericho people. From, I guess you call it the Jerichoans or the Yerichim. That I think about the story of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, which is a totally different story, but interesting. Does anybody know that story about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai? Okay. So when it was during the destruction of the Second Temple, and the Romans had surrounded Jerusalem, and the fighters were very adamant, the people fighting inside that no one could leave. If you were dead, you could leave, but people said, I want to surrender. No. When you're dead, you'll surrender. They wouldn't let anyone out. And there was this Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai who was a scholar, and he saw the writing on the wall. He saw the writing on the wall that they were not going to beat the Roman Empire, and he couldn't get out. So what he did is he had his students and he colluded, and they said he died of the plague because there was a plague, and they put him in a casket. And the only reason you could leave was to bury. And by the way, it was the same in the Warsaw Ghetto. You could leave the ghetto to go to the cemetery to bury somebody. And in my play, which I wrote about, a true story about survivors, these kids would join a funeral procession and go out, and then they'd run into the regular Warsaw, and they would buy food and come back and hide their food in the empty casket that came back, or the empty hearse. Anyway, so he was taken out. And when he got out, he was taken to Vespasian, who was the general at the time. And he came out and he said to him, I know that you're going to succeed. And he actually said this, I predict you will be the next Caesar, the next emperor. Let me and my students go to this little town called Yavna and let us just study. And, we give up. We just want to go away and live alone. And he said, yes. And they're the ones who started rabbinic Judaism and put down the Mishnah. And because of them, rabbinic Judaism started. They started a little yeshiva there, a little academy, which grew, was famous.
Aww.
So it was the same idea of sneaking out. So he made a deal with Vespasian. He didn't know if Vespasian would let him, but he did. And Rachav takes a chance that when the Israelites come back, they will honor their word. And they do, and she survives. So that's like all we know about Rachav. But as we know, the Midrash and the rabbis always have a ton more to say about these women. And I have to say, they usually love them. I want to ask you one more thing. What do you know historically about prostitutes in other societies? Or courtesans? Do you know anything about that? Does anybody know?
Well, in Christianity, there was Mary Magdalene, who now is not considered a prostitute, but she became very famous.
Yeah. Okay, Jeff.
They were always part of the royal court, and they were always a significant part of society. Not only they were an information exchange, and many times were used for that, but they had the pulse of the powerful. And they were highly regarded, not for their sexual prowess, but for their ability to coerce and cajole information as needed.
That is true. And also, they were the only women in like Roman society, Greek society, in Venice, in Italian medieval society. They had more freedom than respectable women. They could mingle with men. They would be educated. They would go out, and everybody, though, the proper women would stay at home and they would think that's terrible, but they didn't care. They were living think about Gigi. Her whole family were prostitutes. In the story of Gigi, the musical, or if you ever paid attention.
I have that, and on my email I have singingGreatLoveSongs@gmail.com. I have Gigi in there.
Okay, yeah.
I have Gigi in there.
All right, so that's a girl whose mother and grandmother were famous courtesans, and now they want to raise Gigi, and she says, "No, I want to be married." We don't marry. We are kept women, and we have a lot more freedom. But that's the whole story, that she wants to, and she does get married. But
I didn't know.
That's what Gigi's really about. But it's this idea. There always was this. They're called the demi-monde, which is the half society, the underclass. But they weren't really underclass, a lot of them. But these women had a lot more freedom. Risa, did you want to say something?
I want to say something, but it's tied up with not remembering words that begin with a capital letter. I just read a book, a very serious novel, based on the trafficking of women that were brought over a 70-year period from the late 1800s to the middle 1900s. They were brought to Buenos Aires. And it was a horrible time for thousands and thousands of women who were captured from the shtetl life and forced into prostitution. And the book goes into the fact that the money behind it was huge, and it was the prostitutes themselves who eventually overthrew the people behind this whole thing. I hope somebody else read the book and can tell me what I was reading. But it's a marvelous, marvelous book about a very true story, and it's all of the men behind this were Jewish.
that's like white slave trade,
It's
human
it's
trafficking, white slave.
human trafficking, but in the end, the women were powerful. They had money, and they overthrew the whole thing, and a lot of them went to Israel.
God bless those women.
Yeah, I'll try to find the name of it. It's on my Kindle.
Yes, there was, but I think we need to distinguish between courtesans,
Yeah.
which are the upper class, and the demi-monde,
Right.
and powerful, usually good-looking women, and those that are lower classes and
Lower
are
class.
refused, and that's what Risa is pointing out.
And those lower class women were completely, disposable.
Yes.
Nobody cared. If they were
Absolutely.
killed, no one cared. So it's a class system within prostitution.
Yeah, I'm not glorifying that. I'm just saying that in some societies, there were these women who were able to be more free. Yes.
In the ancient societies too, they
Right.
were revered. They were like you say, highly educated.
Okay, Risa and then Penina.
No, not Risa.
Okay, Penina,
Okay, let me unmute first.
you're unmuted.
You're unmuted.
Okay. I'm going back to the people of Israel. Okay, now we know that they're ready. They sent in 2 spies before they came back with terrible stories, and the
12
people got
spies.
scared and they
12
weren't ready to go in. Now we have a step in history. Now they're ready. They kept up. They sent 2 people. They have a plan. They have a strategy, and they are going. And they went in literally. This time they did. So they were ready. So that's a big step in history, I think.
Well, entering
the land.
I think you're right for the land. I just wanted to say, one more thing, just going back to the other thing. There was a play called Indecent that was on Broadway and in LA. And it's about a book that was written by the Yiddish writer Shalom Ash. This goes to you, Risa, what you're talking about. The book was called God of Vengeance, the novel. It was written in Yiddish in 1907. The play Indecent is about the indecency of the book. So, but this book written in Yiddish in 1907 was about a Jewish man who had a whorehouse. He had prostitutes in his basement. That was where they lived. And that he was having a Torah written for his daughter so she could marry the rabbi's son. It was about the hypocrisy of piety versus,
I saw the play. It was amazing.
It was a play, but it was first a novel in Yiddish. And that ultimately what happens, it was even more shocking. The daughter falls in love with one of the girls. So it's about lesbianism also. And he, in the play and in real life, he read the novel to this group of Yiddish writers, including Isaac Leib Peretz, who's like one of the father of Yiddish literature. And he said, burn this book. You should have it out, but you can read it, God of Vengeance, or see the play. But anyway, again, that same idea. Okay, so now we're looking at how the rabbis viewed Rachav. I was shocked to see how much they loved her, what they thought about her. And here it is. All right, so this is just kind of the analysis that we don't have to do. Except it says, like the midwives in Egypt, Rachav is faced with a moment of truth and she defies the rulers. So who said that she was doing civil disobedience? You were right. I say that. Okay, wait, forget this. Okay, her family, this is all for you to keep. Okay, but now, this is interesting. The word for window appears 3 times in the Rachav narrative. When she helps the men escape, it marks her house so it will be spared destruction. When she helps the men escape, they tell her, and then when she lives there by the window, then when she helps the men escape, and when she marks her house. Prominent role in other biblical women. With Michal, I talked about that when she has David jump out the window. The mother of Sisera, that's the woman who's looking for her son who's been killed. He was an evil guy. And Jezebel, she's thrown out the window and dogs lick her blood. All these women are looking through their palace windows, separated from the scenes they witness or hope to witness. The window motif accentuates the aloofness of these elite women who were removed from the real world outside the window. In contrast, Rachav is active and an involved user of the window, which becomes a vehicle of her communication with and connection to the outside world. So when you're highborn, again, as I said, you're like locked in looking out, whereas Rachav, her house is in the window. She puts the red string out the window. The men escaped from the window. So it's different. And she can go wherever she wants. Okay. I want to talk about, I want to go to the Midrash because we only have like 15 minutes and this is really interesting. Okay. So who would like to read about the Midrash about Rachav? Who would like to read? Let's see who's there. Lynn, why don't you read? Rahab the harlot.
Okay.
Right here, right here.
I'm looking for, okay, got it. The Midrash includes Rahab among the four most beautiful women the world has ever known.
So, okay, so she was so beautiful. That's interesting already. She was beautiful. Go ahead.
Sarah, Rahab, Abigail, and Esther. Anyone who mentioned her name saying Rahab, Rahab immediately lusted after her.
Okay.
Oh God.
Just conjuring up her in your mind. Rahab, Rahab, you were aroused. Okay.
Oh Lord.
Our Naaman responded to this, but I say Rahab, Rahab, and nothing happens to me, and was answered. This refers to one who knows her and is intimate with her.
Okay, so what I love, okay, so this is Rabbi Nachman says, I say it, but they say, no, if you slept with her and then you say her name, oh, you can't think of it. But what I love, this is a discussion in the Talmud.
Right.
Talmudic men are sitting around talking about this, which is fascinating to me that she's so beautiful and they talk about lust and whatever. And we don't really think of our Talmudic sages as having these kind of conversations, but they do. Okay, keep going.
Let's see.
The
rabbis describe how Rahab was 10 years old at the time of the Exodus from Egypt. She engaged in prostitution during the 40 years of the Israelites' wanderings in the wilderness until the age of 50.
Okay, so at this time in the story of in the book of Joshua, she's 50 years old that the rabbis figure. So this gives her the advantage of hearing all the stories about the Israelites and having grown up knowing everything that they were hearing all over the region about that. So now,
can we talk for a second about how she started being a prostitute at age 10?
Okay, yes.
And how so far all they've talked about is how she's beautiful and lustful and all of that. Nothing about up here, right? Yeah, anyway.
Not yet. You're right. You're right.
But a 10-year-old, that's
not what
you know how I think about that.
Yes, I think it's terrible too. And yet girls were betrothed and even married at 10 years old. And I guess it's terrible.
Right.
The ancient world, I guess it happened, right? And it must have.
The same thing, Rabbi. It's the same thing as a child being sexually assaulted or raped. I'm not going to go into it, but that's the same thing as.
Yeah, of course it is. But in the ancient world, I'm not condoning it, but it happened. That's the way it was with.
Well, they would marry them off, so it was sort of legalized or okay to rape them because they were married.
They still do that in some countries.
That's true.
They still do that in some countries. So it is pretty horrifying, and it's very casual the way they just throw it in here. She was 10 years old when she started, and what?
It doesn't say that though.
Wait, what does it say? That she was? No, it says she was.
What it says is the rabbis describe how Rahab was 10 years old at the time of the Exodus from Egypt.
Yeah, it doesn't say she was a prostitute.
That's right.
But she said she engaged in prostitution during the 40 years of the Israelites' wanderings in the wilderness until the age of 50.
Right, but that doesn't mean she was a prostitute at age 10.
Yeah, it does.
It does mean that she's abandoned by her parents.
Well, yeah, or that they
sold her.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
How sad.
Laura, that it
Right.
didn't say she engaged in it. She could have started when she was 30 even. So it was during the time of the 40 years. It doesn't say it explicitly.
Yeah, no, I think it does because it says until the age of 50. So she was a prostitute for 40 years until the age of 50.
Yeah.
Prostitution during the 40 years of the Israelites' wanderings until the age of 50. Oh, like she might be 70 now, she might be 60.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, we could, since there was no prince or mighty one who did not visit Rachav the harlot, she was well acquainted with people's thoughts. See that we talked about that, right? But now apparently she was really famous because all kinds of princes and kings went to her. When she reported to the spies who came to her house, no man had any more spirit left because of you. She alluded to her professional knowledge of the dimensions of the people's fears because of their apprehension affected their vitality when with her. Oh my God, the rabbis are hilarious. Basically, they're saying they couldn't get it up because they were too afraid of the Israelites. It affected their
Oh
vitality.
my God.
That's what they're saying. Okay.
I don't know if I should be in this group, you know?
I'm telling you, you see? Okay, the Midrash. Okay, who wants to read this? Who hasn't read? Risa, the Midrash recounts.
Just a minute, I gotta plug in here. I can't speak.
What?
Okay, darling, we'll wait.
Okay.
No, I can't read.
All right, never mind. It's okay.
That was my wife.
That was.
Yeah.
That was my wife.
So we didn't spend as much time at all together.
Can you read
as
it or not?
We both would have preferred. But you're feeling better about yourself. And
I cannot
you're
read.
still a little worried.
Okay, Risa,
about
why
the
don't you mute because like we can hear
challenges of the curriculum as you confront it.
trying to mute. Okay. The Midrash recounts 4 disgraceful matters that are mentioned about Rachav. She is called Rachav the harlot, which she was. Joshua states in the book says her dwelling was at the outer side of the city wall and she lived in the actual wall, thus teaching that she engaged in prostitution with the people from inside and with the brigands on the outside. So I guess you could come into her house
In the window.
the wall from the outside or the inside. The third thing to her discredit was her living in the land of Canaan, whose inhabitants were known to be harsh and evil. Well, that's what they say. The fourth negative item refers to her as a resident of Jericho, whose people were fated to extinction. Okay. Although Rachav was from the peoples of the land and the families of the earth, she saved the spies out of love of Israel and its God, and God rewarded her out of love and protected her family from death. So I want you to know that according to archaeologists, even though we have this very colorful narrative about destruction of Jericho and whatever, it's not clear that the Israelites came in and destroyed all the Canaanites. They actually lived among them. They came in and lived among them because we know there was a lot of idol worship in the land of Canaan, and they found thousands of little fertility goddesses in the land of Canaan because Canaanites lived there too. They kind of lived together. And this story of them destroying, which always bothered me, that God says, go in and kill every single man, woman, and child, but save the trees, which also bothered me because you're not allowed to destroy trees, is kind of an extreme. They may have conquered, they may have entered, but they didn't slaughter the whole population of the land. They didn't do that. They lived with them. They lived with them, and they mingled. And there was always, why do you think God was always saying, don't follow the false idols? Because it was very appealing, to worship a God you could see than a God you couldn't see. It's hard for them intellectually. So I love the story, and I love the story of Rachav, but I don't think it's not fact, but more truth about us coming into the land. So, okay, I hope I didn't what did I just do? Okay, so where are we? We have like a few more minutes. Let's continue. Yes, Panina. You're muted.
Every time that there is a change in history, a woman is either barren and gives a birth to somebody important that will help change the course. But there was a change of history every time there is a woman. Every time there was a change of history, there was a woman involved that either gave birth to a person who started this era,
or say
this case helped. And they choose a woman because it's a beginning. It's the person who gives birth. So it's not necessarily a symbol of one story. I think it's a symbol of moving from one era to another. Whether they lived with the Canaanites or they killed, that's not the point. The point is that they're entering the land, and it's a difference now. It's a new beginning again, change in history. Same thing happened with Moses. It wasn't his mother, it's the Pharaoh's daughter that was barren, that took him. There is always a woman. Hannah, and whatever, Romans, you're getting to the point of the Roman era. There is always stories about women because women represent birth and new beginnings.
I love that.
I humbly say
represents their period of establishing their entrance to the land and becoming the people who live in that land. Whether they live with the neighbors, we have it till today. We live with other people,
That's
but we're still there.
Yeah.
I love that, Penina. Thank you so much.
Amen. Humbly say amen.
You're absolutely right. And we have Deborah when there's like a war and there's women, we're going to read about them next time, and changing everything around, basically saving the people and killing the head, the Hitler of the time, the Putin
Right on, Mama.
time. So, okay, I just want to look at a little more of the text because, and you all have this to take a look to read further. It says that she converted. It says when Rahav heard of the miracles that down here, Rahav the convert. When Rahav heard of the miracles that God had performed for Israel when he parted the sea for them, she wanted to cleave to Israel. After having engaged in prostitution for 40 years, Rahav converted at the age of 50. She said, Master of the universe, I have sinned with three things, my eye, my thigh, and my stomach. By the merit of these things, pardon me, the rope, the window, and the wall. Pardon me for engaging in harlotry because I endangered myself when I lowered the rope for the spies from the window in the wall. So the rabbis view her favorably. They love her. And she's mentioned as one of the most famous converts who joined Israel, including Jethro, who was Moses' father-in-law, and Naaman, who I don't remember who that is. I got to be honest with you. Do you know, Penina, who Naaman is?
Excuse me? Which the word?
Naaman.
He was the general that had the eczema.
Oh, it comes from the word faithful.
Oh, okay. He was the general. Okay.
I think he was that, and he had eczema, and Elijah cured him by having him dip in the River Jordan. Wasn't that the one?
I think you're right. And then they say Rahav symbolizes proper behavior in contrast to the sinning Israelites because she mended her ways and she repented and, she became Jewish. And so the rabbis then say that here on the bottom, the rabbis deduced from the story of Rahav the superiority of repentance over prayer. Moses prayed exceedingly, but God did not accept his entreaty to enter the promised land, while the repentance of Rahav, the harlot, was accepted, and 7 kings and 8 prophets issued from her.
Wow. I love it.
So that's pretty, wait, let me know. Where do I stop share? Because I lost you guys. How do I do this? Share, hold on. So once again, we have a woman, as Penina said, affecting history, making a huge change, and the rabbis really appreciating even the lowest. It also shows that this our whole Torah and Tanakh is not a story of kings and princesses and princes and royalty or whatever, and even heroes like the Iliad and the Odyssey is really about great heroes and generals and kings and whatever. And if you think of the history of England, that's always through the kings and the queens. But here we have like even the lowest person can make huge changes for her people, for history. And it makes us, the common person, feel valued and important. There's no hierarchy when it comes to goodness, to chesed, to and to change, making a huge impact on history.
Amen, Rabbi.
That's the story of Rahav, and most people never heard of her, so that's why it's a good story. And
We should make a movie. We should make a movie about this.
there must be one somewhere. I want to wish you all a happy Pesach.
Happy
Pesach. And
Love you.
may you all have beautiful seders. And I will see you in 2 weeks. And
See you in 2 weeks.
bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Love you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Everyone enjoy their Passover.
Bye, Jeff. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
How are you, Miriam? Are you well, Miriam? You're muted.
Jeff, I was hoping that we'd stay a moment longer and that Hannah Gold would let us stay. I want to welcome you back from another world. Oh my God, have you fully recovered?
Oh, yes. No, I'm back to my self.
Your same old saucy self, right?
Wherever I was, I am again. So.
What? No change?
No,
Wow.
only hopefully for the better, you know.
You bet. Anyhow, it's quite a thrill to see you. What do you have on your underarm here? You got some kind of injection or something?
That's a monitor, a glucose monitor.
Oh, it's a monitor. Oh,
Yeah.
So it stays there, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So how is your glucose?
Well, it goes up and goes down, but I try to keep it in the normal, reasonable range.
Okay. I'm very interested. Just answer me this question.
Sure.
What do you do for what is the problem of glucose? Is it tied into diabetes? Is that it?
Absolutely. And, when your bloodstream has excessive glucose in it, it interferes with the amount of water in your body, which you lose through urination because the sugar carries water out of the body. So it becomes an agent of dehydration and it can be difficult.
Okay.
So you have to monitor, the concentrations in your bloodstream so that excessive thirst, excessive urination, and water loss from your body is avoided.
Okay, I did not know that. That's so interesting.
Yes.
Thank you for telling me. Okay, dear. Now, are your activities kind of limited or are they the same or what?
No, my activities are about the same. I always enjoy doing my gardening, harvesting my roses. The things around the house are comfortable and easy. And I love to shop. So, I'm the world's best husband.
Okay. Oh, so you're going shopping. That means you're getting in your car and driving?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's good. So that's very non-confining. People feel terribly confined.
No, I'm not confined at all.
Okay.
Only by choice.
Okay, dear. Because, what, dear?
I said, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I drive a little past 95, and so I don't drive like I used to. But I must go to the library for all my library books. I belong to 3 book groups. It makes me crazy, crazier than I am. And
deliver books to you.
No, not from the county libraries. They don't. Not from LA. I never even asked. I don't think they deliver it.
Here in Las Vegas, the libraries will deliver to seniors, their books. So, I'm sure it exists in Los Angeles.
Oh my God, I never thought of asking even. Okay, I might ask, but my kids do not let me shop. My kids, I think, are as old as you are, Jeff. That's how old my kids are.
They don't appreciate the wisdom and abilities that you still maintain. And, you know, they need to be put in their place sometimes.
No, they don't want me to stand. They have two parents in their 90s, and they don't want them standing on Ralph's lines next to people. They don't feel comfortable. So they buy too much food for us. We really have too much from them. And I tell you what, Jeff, I still wake up with tremendous gratitude. That's what I'm motivated by from morning till night. Gratefulness.
That's why you have reached 95. You appreciate the value in your life and the joy of family. And
I don't know the reason.
I think that is protective. There are people that I've dealt with as patients in nursing homes, and they divide themselves into two different groups. One are those people who are mean, miserable, forbissina people who have no family and no visitors. They do not do well long-term. And then there are those residents whose family has not abandoned them, who come and visit, who share stories,